Welcome to this video. I'm Harrison-Plastow from Source9 Insights, and in this video I'm going to share one of the most important lessons that I've learned from doing emotional insights work. So I'm always listening to people, understanding people, and we've developed this whole model called the empathy framework that helps us to do that really, really well. And in other videos I've explained how it works, how you can use it to understand audiences, explain behaviours, encourage behaviour change, and understand how people see the world and make sense of the world. But what I want to do in this video is share with you what happens when you apply this to yourself. The more that I have used this, understanding other people, inevitably I've started seeing how it plays out in myself. And this is where I found some huge value. So I want to share this with you too. It leads to a different way of seeing the world, and it gives me a great sense of peace and understanding. And anyway, I'll just get into it and I'll share with you why I love this so much and why I get so much out of it. What I want to share with you is this. We go through life thinking that our circumstances determine our experiences. I've spent an awful lot of my life, my working life, understanding people's experiences and their circumstances and assuming that the two are involved in this causal relationship, that if I can understand how people are and the context that they're in, and I can understand their behaviours and so on, I can get a feel for what they might do, what they might not do, why they like something, why not, how to create emotional value for people. And a big part of what we do is understanding these beliefs and these narratives and these emotional responses that drive behaviours and using that to inform strategies of all different descriptions. But here's the thing. In mapping this, what I have come to learn is that our circumstances do not create our experiences. It appears that they do, and that is most of the time for most people the experience, but it's not actually true, and here's why. So if we look at this diagram here, and I'll just caveat this by saying all models are wrong, some are useful. This is a map, it is not the territory, it's just a way of trying to take something really, really complicated and make it super simple. So with that in mind, if we think about external stimuli and then we think about our behaviours and our emotional responses, if it were the case that there is an objective reality and then you experience a stimuli and then it causes a response and there's this direct causal relationship there, then every time you encountered that stimuli you would have the same response. But that is not true. So let's take, for example, a common experience where you are waiting on a Zoom call to have a meeting with somebody. Now, let's run through 3 different scenarios of that same Zoom call and look at 3 completely different responses. So the stimuli is the exact same. You're supposed to be meeting, let's say, Jane at 1 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon on a Zoom call to talk through a really important work project. Now, in one scenario, let's say that you are really tired, you've been rushing around lots, you've got loads going on at the moment, and Jane is late, and you're sat there and you're incredibly frustrated. Now let's move to another situation, another scenario, and let's say that Jane is late, it's 10 minutes late, and you're sat there waiting, but because you've been so busy all day and you haven't had a chance to do anything, you don't mind because you're like, oh great, I can have a bite to eat or a cup of coffee or something like that. Third scenario, you arrange to meet at 1, she doesn't show up for 10 minutes, but you know that Jane had an appointment that morning and that there's something sensitive going on in her life and you actually feel a bit worried about her. Now, off of those 3 different situations, your behaviours will then be different. So in the situation where you're frustrated, the next encounter you have with Jane, there might be some tension there, or you might go into the rest of your day with that frustration, and that might make you make different decisions and do things differently. In the second one, where you've had a bit of peace and quiet, you're going to behave very differently. You're not so bothered that she didn't show up, and you've had a bit of a breather and you actually feel better going into the rest of your day, your behaviours will be different. And then in the third context, you might send her an email or drop her a call and check out if she's okay. Very different behaviour to scenario one. All three situations, the stimuli is exactly the same, but what is different? Well, you are different. It's what's going on inside of you. It's the beliefs that you hold that you are using to make sense of the world. And it's the stories that you're telling inside your head. Now, depending on your context, depending on how you view Jane, her situation, what you know about her situation, what your own perception of your own needs being met in that moment are, is going to determine how you make sense of that stimuli. The stories that you're going to tell in your head, and then your emotions are your emotional responses to those stories. So our emotions are responses, and they are filtered through the patterns that we use to make sense of the world. Now, some of those will be there from the day you were born. Some of those will be inherited from your parents, intergenerational beliefs that you were unconsciously soaked in and absorbed as a child, and you just completely take for granted. Lessons that you've learned through life, things that you've read, your education, your experiences, all bundled up in this unique package that is you. Those are your lenses of belief through which you are interpreting and making sense of the world. Now, because of those beliefs, you're then going to have different inner narratives going on that make sense of what's going on outside of you. So in this sense, there's no real objective truth. There is this subjectivity. You are giving everything its meaning. What you believe to be perceiving is not the world itself. It is subjectively filtered and patterned, and it is then creating an understanding. You are creating meaning. We give everything its meaning. And in that meaning making, narrative is so important. And that story that you're telling in your head about why Jane's not there is going to lead to a different emotional response. And these two things work together, and you're either going to feel that you've got this unmet need in you, or you're going to feel that you've got a met need in you, depending on your perception of the context. So the stimuli does not equal the response. The circumstances do not therefore determine the experience. Now just think about that for a moment. If you can become cognizant of the inner narrative in your head, if you can become cognizant of the beliefs that you hold that give rise to such a narrative, and if you can become cognizant of the way that you're perceiving the world such that you think that your emotional needs are being met or not being met, it means that you can become cognizant of your emotional world. You're no longer a victim to an external circumstance. You find a space where you can take not necessarily control, because we can't control what's happening, but we can control how we respond to it. We can become much more mindful, much more present, much more aware, and we can find a space inside ourselves that allows us to hold our emotions and to understand them, and to know why they're there, where they've come from, and to get a feel for how we're perceiving the world and how we might be able to perceive it differently if we change the way that we look at things. Now, what this then means is it is totally possible to create an inner experience that is not conditional on outside circumstances. We can take ownership of the meaning that we create. We can see a world outside ourselves that, no matter how challenging it is, we can remain unconditional in our inner experience, because we've recognized that it is ours and that we are shaping it and creating it. Now, this creates a whole different way of being in the world. It means that we can cultivate an unconditional way of being. And I for one believe that that unconditional being is best suited to being in loving relationship with everything. Now, just as I've used this framework to understand other people from all different walks of life that are nothing like me, but once I've mapped their beliefs and their narratives and their emotional needs, I have these aha moments of, well, of course, how could it be any other way? Of course you behave the way that you do. All of a sudden, with enough empathy, everything is forgiven. It couldn't be any other way. And when we apply this to ourselves and we give ourselves that same level of forgiveness and we recognize that it couldn't be any other way than how it was, even when things turn out that were regrettable, when we're honest with ourselves and understand our traits, our patterns, our histories, our traumas, and we understand the stories that we've been telling ourselves, no wonder we had these emotional reactions to those inner narratives that shaped our behaviours, and we did what we did. If we could go back and change it, perhaps we would, but it is what it is. So we can give ourselves this greater sense of forgiveness and acceptance, and we can give others that same level of forgiveness and acceptance. It allows us to face any situation without fear. We adjust ourselves rather than seeking to adjust the world. One of the most greatest causes of suffering is trying to adjust the outside world so that we can feel good inside. It's looking at reality and wishing that reality were another way, but being locked into that perspective of what reality is, which gives away our power to create and to make meaning, to understand. If instead we choose to adjust our own lenses of belief, adjust our own narratives, we can arrive at outcomes where we're having emotional responses that are positive, where we feel that our needs are being met no matter what. And that for me is a huge sense of personal freedom and power. And I think it's a really important lesson, and I'm incredibly grateful for being able to see it through having these experiences and understanding others more. It's helping me to understand myself, and I hope this is really useful to you. The second thing, or the flip side of that, is to say that when we believe that our circumstances control our experiences, we create victimhood. We create a situation in which we say, oh, well, I would be happy if, or if only these other people would do this, then I'd be happy, or any kind of condition. And when we make our happiness conditional, we give it away. We become at the mercy of our circumstances and other people. We rob ourselves of our ability to shape our own sense of being in the world. So what I'm talking about here is escaping this notion of being a victim, and instead looking, as all the Eastern traditions, well, all the traditions, all the spiritualities and so on, have always said, it's inside. It's a journey within that makes all the difference in the world. We don't need to control the outside world. This also has massive implications for how we are in the world. So much of modern society is about attaining things, getting things, meeting all these conditions so that we can feel good. If only we realised that our peace, our joy, our happiness, our contentment are given already. It's just that we give it away by seeing the world through beliefs and narratives that tell us otherwise, that tell us that, oh, we can't possibly give ourselves that feeling without having that attachment, that condition met, when it's not true. Like with the instance with the Zoom call, the stimuli does not determine the response. Our circumstances do not determine our experiences. We do. Now, there's a whole lot of responsibility in that. And on days where you're feeling terrible, that is really hard to accept. But on those really hard days, it's important to just allow it, to accept it, to recognize that there are stories going on, there are beliefs going on that are causing that. And you may not know what they are in that moment, and you may have charged them up so they've got a real strong hold on you. But just remember that they will pass, and that you will be able to understand them and reflect on them and learn from them. So we don't need to push any of these negative emotions away. We don't need to manage our inner world to stop us from ever having any negative emotion. It's really important that we do. What I'm saying is it's just really important to understand what to do with it, how to handle it, and to know that we are not victims of circumstance. We're not at the mercy of other people, and that ultimately we can empower ourselves and each other to be the change within us that we want to see in the world, and that we don't need anyone's permission to do that. So yes, that's the lesson that I've learned from doing insights work. I thought it'd be nice to share something that's a bit more personal rather than just talking about market research and behaviour change and different models for it. Because ultimately all this work is about understanding people and understanding change, and that does have real benefits for us as individuals as well, because we're all people. So I hope you found this useful. If you have, please like and subscribe to tell the algorithm to show this to more people. Follow me on LinkedIn, Rob Harrison-Plastow, and every day I try to share something about insights, emotion, empathy, beliefs, how people make sense of the world and so on. So if you found this interesting, please give me a follow and stay in touch. And if at any point you want some help understanding your audiences, then please, I think there'll be some sort of contact information somewhere around here. Give me a shout, because this stuff is also incredibly useful for creating emotional value and helping you in your business, or if you're a policymaker or you run an NGO or a non-profit. We're in the business of helping people to understand behaviour and create emotional value so that you can achieve your aims. So yeah, if that's useful, reach out and let me know. Otherwise, thank you ever so much, and I'll see you in next week's video. Thank you.